More than a president, Theodore or Teddy Roosevelt was a man of many accomplishments, with a vast range of interests. He heavily influenced the United States and even the 20th century. Let's take a look at 10 things you may not know about the Colonel. It's time to load the program and enter the vault. Number 10. Peacemaker. Known today as the Russo-Japanese War, the Japanese Empire and Russian Empire fought a year-and-a-half-long war over, among other things, ports in Manchuria and Korea. Following several decisive battles, both Russia and Japan accepted the offer from then-President Roosevelt to mediate the peace talks to end the war. Roosevelt's efforts in mediating the talks and securing peace between Russia and Japan awarded him the Nobel Peace Prize in 1906 for, quote, his role in bringing an end to the bloody war recently waged between two of the world's great powers, Japan and Russia, end quote. Number 9. Blinded by the right? In his younger years, Roosevelt's world was heavily impacted by his debilitating asthma and overall poor health. He would overcome these problems by embracing what he called a strenuous lifestyle, which included activities such as rowing and boxing. While governor of New York, he would box with sparring partners several times each week. This practice would continue into his presidency until he was hit so hard in the face that he became blind in his left eye. It is likely that the blow which caused the left eye blindness came from a right-handed hit delivered by his sparring partner. Number 8. Mixed martial arts. Prior to his boxing incident, while president in 1904, Roosevelt invited an instructor of the Imperial Japanese Naval Academy, Yamashita Yoshiaki. Let me know if I pronounced that correctly. The invitation was to provide Roosevelt and some White House staffers lessons in jiu-jitsu. The skill and techniques of jiu-jitsu fighting impressed Roosevelt, leading him to advocate that jiu-jitsu training be made available to American soldiers. Although the military did not initially adopt this as part of the training regimen, Roosevelt's championing and advocacy of jiu-jitsu would go a long way in establishing Japanese martial arts in the U.S. at the dawn of the 20th century. Number 7. A man of two centuries. Roosevelt was born in the 19th century, yet heavily influenced the 20th century. One of the lesser-known facts about his early life is that as a then 6-year-old, Roosevelt was able to witness the funeral procession of Abraham Lincoln from his grandfather's mansion in Union Square, New York City. The moment was actually captured on film on April 25, 1865. A young Theodore and his brother Elliot can be seen in the second-floor window as Lincoln's funeral procession passes by. Number 6. Rare company. Before becoming president, Roosevelt served as vice president under the William McKinley presidency, and before that he was the governor of New York. Roosevelt is in rare company here, as only 5 other individuals have been governor, vice president, and then president. Those would be Thomas Jefferson, Martin Van Buren, John Tyler, Andrew Johnson, and Calvin Coolidge. Along with this, Roosevelt remains the youngest president ever to assume office at age 42. Number 5. Father and son. When the Spanish-American War began in 1898, Roosevelt resigned his post as Assistant Secretary of the Navy and joined the Army, sort of. Together with Colonel Leonard Wood, Roosevelt formed the U.S. Volunteer Cavalry Regiment, which the press soon began to refer to as the Rough Riders. This volunteer force consisted of men from various walks of life, including Ivy Leaguers, frontiersmen, professional athletes, Native Americans, miners, sheriffs, and former soldiers, among others. The unit trained in San Antonio, Texas, and used a combination of U.S. Army issue gear along with items purchased with money received from donations. Following their training, the regiment landed in Daiquiri, Cuba. In June of 1898, along with regular troops, the Rough Riders participated in the Battle of Las Guasimas, the first land battle of the war involving American troops, which ended with the Spanish army abandoning their positions. On July 1, 1898, the Rough Riders participated in the battle that would earn them fame and prove to be one of the decisive battles of the war, the Battle of San Juan Hill. During the battle, Roosevelt led his Rough Riders on a charge to take Kettle Hill in support of regular forces who were taking San Juan Hill. Despite being a cavalry regiment, Roosevelt had the only horse and used it to ride back and forth between the troops as they advanced up the hill under fire. During the later part of the assault, Roosevelt had to walk up the remainder of the hill as his horse had become entangled in barbed wire. Roosevelt would later reflect on that battle as, quote, "the great day of my life," end quote. For his actions during the battle, Roosevelt will be posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor in 2001, and is the only president ever to receive the award. Theodore's eldest son, Theodore Roosevelt III, or Theodore Jr., fought in both World War I and World War II. During the D-Day invasion, Theodore Jr. was the only general to land by sea with the first wave of troops, and at age 56, the oldest man in the Allied invasion force on the ground that day. What made this more remarkable is that he suffered from a heart condition and arthritis. Sadly, Theodore Jr. would succumb to a heart attack in France on July of 1944. Just over a month after the D-Day invasion. For his gallantry and actions at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty on D-Day, 6 June 1944, Theodore Jr. was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor in September of 1944. General Patton wrote in his diary that Theodore was, quote, "one of the bravest men I have ever known," end quote, and served as one of the pallbearers at his funeral. The awarding of the Medal of Honor to both Theodore Roosevelt and Theodore Jr. made for one of only two father and son duos to win the Medal of Honor. The other pair? Arthur MacArthur and Douglas MacArthur. Number 4. Prolific and influential author. Throughout his lifetime, Roosevelt wrote and published several books. Perhaps his most influential work is his first book, The Naval War of 1812, which he began writing while a student at Harvard. To write the book, Roosevelt reviewed original source materials of both the United States and England, and published the book in 1882 while just 23 years old. 4 years after being published, the U.S. Navy ordered a copy placed on every ship. Widely considered a seminal work in its field, it is still studied today, and the book would go on to have an enormous impact on the formation of the modern U.S. Navy. Roosevelt's motivation for writing the book? He wanted to challenge himself and write on a subject that technically and historically challenged him. Number 3. Badlands Rancher. Following an 1883 visit to the Dakota Territory, Roosevelt invested some $14,000 to become a cattle rancher. Over the next few years, Roosevelt would split time between New York and his ranch in the Badlands of Dakota. While there, he learned to ride Western style, hunt and rope, and help ranchers organize to address overgrazing and other issues. This directly resulted in the formation of the Missouri Stockmen's Association. Additionally, Roosevelt formed the Boone and Crockett Club, which is today North America's oldest wildlife and conservation organization. During his time in the Badlands, Roosevelt published 3 more books: Hunting Trips of a Ranchman, Ranch Life and the Hunting Trail, and The Wilderness Hunter. In 1886, Roosevelt served as deputy sheriff in Billings County, North Dakota. Number 2, police reformer. In 1894, Roosevelt was appointed a position on the board of New York City Police Commissioners by newly elected Mayor William Strong, who was a reform-minded Republican. Roosevelt soon became president of the Board of Commissioners and worked to overhaul the police force. He incorporated annual physical exams, regular inspections of firearms, and recruits were appointed positions based on their mental and physical qualifications rather than political connections. Along with this, Roosevelt established meritorious service medals while closing down corrupt police stations. To modernize the force, Roosevelt had telephones installed in station houses, and to ensure that officers were on duty, he would walk officers' beats late at night and early in the morning. When he became governor of New York State, Roosevelt would sign an act that replaced the police commission with a single police commissioner. Number 1. Conservationist. Roosevelt was a lifelong lover of the outdoors and nature. As president, he established the United States Forest Service and signed into law the creation of 5 national parks. Additionally, Roosevelt went on to establish 4 game preserves, the first 51 bird reserves, and 150 national forests. In doing so, he placed about 230 million acres under public protection, and would use executive orders to establish some 150 million acres of reserved forestry land. In total, some 121 forest reserves were established in 31 states as a result of his executive orders. Today, the Theodore Roosevelt National Park in western North Dakota covers some 70,000 plus acres and is the only American national park named directly after a single person. it is difficult to overstate the achievements obtained and the impact Theodore Roosevelt had on the Navy, the United States, and even the 20th century. Similar to his life of varied interests and accomplishments, today Roosevelt is remembered amongst seemingly unrelated ways. Along with a national park named after him, Roosevelt is one of 4 presidents featured at the Mount Rushmore National Memorial. There is also a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier named after him. CV-71, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, is an instrument of American power projection and has been in service since 1986. The carrier is a modern implementation of "speak softly and carry a big stick," a phrase and policy Roosevelt used during his presidency, which means attempt peaceful negotiations while also being prepared for confrontation by displaying one's power. CV-71's nickname is Big Stick, and its radio call sign is Rough Rider. We may never again see an individual win the Medal of Honor, Nobel Prize, and impact so many different areas as Theodore Roosevelt did. From conservation via national parks to military policy, Roosevelt achieved an incredible amount of success in his 60 years of life. Thanks for watching the very first video on this channel. More content is on the way. If you found value in this video, then click on subscribe and mash that bell so you'll get notified when the next video comes out. Theodore Roosevelt, a man of many accomplishments. Now you know.